Hey everyone, this is Avish Parashar, and I'm doing my first Facebook Live video. Alright, that didn't quite work. Here we go. Hey everyone, this is Avish Parashar, and I'm doing my very first Facebook Live video. This is what I'm calling my Applied Improv Comedy mini show. I'm going to perform a little bit of improv comedy, hopefully brighten and lighten your day, but also share some ideas that can inspire you and maybe give you some techniques you can use to deal with the change we're going through, and also just to help you be more creative and help your life in general. So if you're unfamiliar with improv comedy, normally this is like Whose Line Is It Anyways, where normally I would be on stage with other performers in front of a live audience, getting suggestions from them right there and getting that feedback and seeing what's working. Because of the way everything is going, I'm doing Soloprov and Virtuaprov, which is by myself with no fellow performers. I have no audience from which to get suggestions, and I have no audience from which to get volunteers for some of the things I'm going to do. So the format here I'm going to work on is how to I'm working some of this out so I can figure out, number one, Facebook Live. This is my first big Facebook Live. Number two, how I can do some of these things virtually, without partners, with no audience. So it's kind of a fun way for you to get a little bit behind the curtain, but also we should have some fun. So I'm just going to kick things off. Welcome. We're going to do some improv comedy. Now, I have a theme for this mini show. So everything I do is going to tie into this one overall theme, and that is around the idea of using interruptions to your advantage. Now, an interruption doesn't just mean like, oh, you're on the phone and your dog barks. Interruption is anything that kind of breaks your routine. And in improv, this is a big thing. Breaking the routine is how we make things interesting. So I'm going to share 3 improv games that all kind of involve things that force you to go in a different direction. And then from each one, talk about one simple idea that you can use and apply right away. Overall, everything's going to fall into the category of an improv technique called SJI: spontaneity, justification, incorporation. When I learned this technique, it really changed how I did improv and changed the quality of the improv I was doing. So all that means is spontaneity. You just blurt the first thing that comes in your mind. Then the J, justification. All you have to do is justify why you said that thing you just did. And then incorporation. Don't just move on from that interruption, but rather incorporate it. So if I'm forced to say something, I explain why I said it, and then I'm going to make the rest of the story somehow involve that, or at least let that drive the direction of the story, as opposed to just ignoring that and going back to what I was doing. So the first improv game I'm going to play is, surprise, surprise, a game called Ding. This is my signature game. My keynote and my website is called Ding Happens. And so I'm going to share with you the game Ding. Now, the way this game would work in front of a live audience is I'd bring a volunteer up on stage and hand them this bell. Then I would begin telling everyone a story, and anytime the volunteer wanted, they could ring the bell. I would then have to go back, repeat what I said, but change it somehow. So if my story was, once upon a time there was a girl with a pet dog. Once upon a time there was a girl with a pet cat, with a pet mouse, with a pet 3-toed sloth, whatever. Every time I ring, I would have to change. Or every time the person rang, I'd have to change. When they stopped ringing, I'd keep going, but only as if I said that last thing. So in this example, the dog, the cat, and the mouse would be gone. We'd have a story about a girl and her pet 3-toed sloth. Now, normally what I would do is I'd bring up a volunteer. However, again, Virtuaprov and Soloprov, what I've worked out here is I'm going to ring the bell myself. Now, that might seem like cheating, like, oh, how are you actually, you're not really doing improv. Hey, Jen, ding, thank you very much. So you might be thinking, that's not improv. But you'll see with the speed and the pace, I realize I don't actually need volunteers. So if you watch me do this and somehow think that, hey, he must have been pre-planning that, then you're giving me way more credit, because this would take a lot of rehearsal to get the speed and timing down for this. All right, so what I am going to do, though, is I'm going to think of an idea. I'm going to think of a job occupation, and that's what I'm going to make the story about. It's going to be random. It is going to be about a bricklayer, a person who lays bricks professionally, and I'm going to tell the story Ding. Ding style. Here we go. Once upon a time, there was a guy named Stanley who was a bricklayer, and he had a pretty average-sized business. He had the biggest business in the whole town. He had no business at all. He was just starting. he was actually not even licensed. He was not even conducting real business. He was just going around to people's houses, pretending to be a bricklayer and saying, hey, can I build a wall for you? Well, most people said no. Well, most people said yes, because this is a town that didn't like their neighbors, so they all tried to build walls around each other. And he got lots and lots of business. Well, one day, he knocked on a door, and this big burly man, this beautiful woman opened the door. This dog opened the door. And he's like, why is a dog opening the door? And he said, excuse me, dog, can I lay some bricks for you? Well, of course, the dog just looked at him and didn't say anything. The dog started talking like a human. The dog bit him right on the leg. The dog ran away. The dog climbed to the top of the house. So now this guy is sitting there thinking to himself, oh my God, not only am I going to lose business, but the owner of this house is going to be mad at me. I let his dog out and the dog is on top of the house. So now we need to get up there, but I don't have a ladder. But then he said, aha, I'm a bricklayer. I can build a ladder out of bricks. I can build a wall and jump from it. I can build a car out of bricks because I am that good that I can build a conveyance where most people just build walls. So he quickly put together a car. He quickly put together a rocket ship. He quickly put together a flying unicorn made out of bricks. It was sort of a magical thing. And he got on this brick unicorn and flew all the way to the top of the thing. And when the dog saw him, the dog barked. The dog said, aha, you made it. The dog turned into a wizard and said, I am a wizard, and you made a unicorn. You are the first person to come by and pass the test. And he inherited the kingdom and lived happily ever after. All right, those ding stories tend to just kind of taper off, so I had to end it somewhere. So that's an example. So that was the game Ding. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you believe me that I had none of that planned. I didn't know it was going to be about a bricklayer, and I certainly didn't know that it was going to involve a dog. Every time the bell rang, I changed. Now, in a keynote type format, what that would be all about is, I would say, life is, you go along and things are going well, but every so often, ding, ding happens. And it's how well we deal with those ding moments that determine our success. Not just how well we plan, but rather how quickly and effectively we respond to those ding moments. So one principle that I use to play that game that I think applies very well off stage is simply to go with your first thought, to go with your first response. Because what's going to happen is that bell's going to ring. If I pause to think, like, oh, he knocked on the door and a man opened it, ding. A woman opened it, ding. It's going to slow the game down, and it's going to stunt your creativity. Right? Having a dog, making a magical unicorn out of bricks, none of that would have come from a thought process. What happens is when the bell rings, an idea bubbles up. And if you stop to evaluate it, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to be using the weak part of your mind, lacking creativity, and feeling stuck. If you just start going. Now, I never knew where that game was going to go. I never knew where the story was going to go or end up or what the conflict would be. So you don't know when you start, when you trust your first instinct. And so this is what I encourage you to do. We are going through a time of massive, massive change and uncertainty. And the people who are struggling the most are the ones who are looking for certainty. They want to know the whole story. You know, the bricklayer story, right? They want to know where the bricklayer story is going to end up before they respond to that ding moment. And that will not get you moving. In this climate, and really dealing with any change quickly, what you have to do is take that first idea and go with it. Now, that doesn't mean full implementation. That doesn't mean that you have to run out and do it. It means that you can't immediately discount the first idea because initially it sounds crazy or no good. Follow that path, explore that idea, and then try implementing and see what comes out, right? That's how this ding game works. If you just go, 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 good stuff happens. If you stop and think, you don't get anywhere. So that's ding and how you can apply the idea of blurting and spontaneity, justification, and incorporation off stage. Next game. This is a game called A to Z, or the alphabet scene. Now, it's interesting. What I've decided to do in these mini shows is do a couple games that I'm pretty confident will work. Either I've done them virtually before or I feel good about them. But sandwich in between, the second game is going to be one that I'm not entirely sure how it's going to work. To practice what I preach. Number one, I say you got to try stuff and see what happens. And number two, I say you got to be willing to fail. So A to Z is a game that normally is done with two performers, and they're doing a scene or having a conversation. When the first person speaks, the first word out of their mouth starts with the letter A. When the next person speaks, the first word out of their mouth has to start with the letter B. Next sentence is C, then D, then E, and so on, getting all the way to Z. Now, because I don't have a partner, and I don't want to do another story like I just did, I am going to be doing a two-person scene, a two-character scene with one actor. So I'm going to switch back and forth between the characters going A, B, C, D, E, and we'll see how that goes. Now, you can probably guess why I say I'm not entirely sure how this is going to work, practicing what I preach. And I'm actually going to do this game 2 times. I'm going to do it once, and I may not get all the way to Z, so you can see how the game works. And then I'm going to do it again with a refinement, so you can see how it changes the story, the energy, and the success of the game. All right, so to begin, I'm going to start the letter A. And what I'm going to start with is a conflict between 2 people. And, if you are watching and you want to throw a suggestion in about a conflict between 2 people or a type of occupation as a suggestion, I'm certainly happy to take that into consideration. You got about 5 seconds if you want to throw a suggestion in the comment box for me to make this A to Z about. But I anticipated, I prepped and planned to do this completely on my own. So if you don't, I'm just going to get rolling. So I'm going to pick a conflict between 2 people. And I'm going to say that one person owes the other person money, and they don't have, but the guy who owes the money doesn't have the funds to repay it. A to Z, here we go, starting with A. Are you going to pay me back my money today? Bob, I would love to, but I don't have the funds on hand. Can't you see that I am so angry right now that I'm going to break your legs if you don't pay me my money? Don't threaten me. I freeze up under pressure, and I hate it when you do that. Everybody always says that they get freeze up under pressure, but what am I supposed to do? I need to pay bills too. Fortunately, I don't have money, but I do have a plan. If you were to work with me, we could maybe make more money even than I owe you. Good idea. Keep going. I'd like to hear more about that. How about if we work together, and I think we need to invest the money you're collecting from people into some equities and annuities, and that way we can increase our revenue. Right now, you are trading time for money. We can really invest and make that work better. I've never invested before. How do you suggest we go about doing that? Just trust me with your bank account information, and I will buy us some stocks, and we'll get going. All right, I'm going to stop right there. So that's a flavor of the game. That's A to Z. And I got some great suggestions. Thank you very much. I'm going to use some of those suggestions when I replay this game. Now, the reason I played this game is to show you the feel, right? That's the basic structure. But I'll be honest with you. For years when I played this game, I never liked it. I didn't like putting it in my shows. I didn't like playing it. I felt it was slow, lacked humor, lacked energy. And I'm not watching. I don't have an audience. So I'm not sure what the response here was. But I found it not to be super exciting. And then I was chatting with someone else who does improv, and I mentioned them, I don't like this game, and she said it was her favorite, one of her favorites. And I told her why. I'm like, it's slow. She says, oh, we always add a timer to it. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, we just make a timer, and you have to get through the alphabet before time runs out. And that changed everything. Because what happens is, when you're playing a game like this, and you don't have a timer, you have the luxury of thought. So when if my next letter is E, I can pause for a couple seconds and think, all right, what can I say that starts with E that's going to drive my story forward? Basically what happens is you get an idea for where you want the story to go, and then you start thinking, how can I say that using the next letter of the alphabet? Now that slows the energy down, and it also limits creativity because you are just trying to keep on your same tack. The other way to play the game is if you can't immediately think of a way to say what you want to with the next letter, you just say the first word that comes to your mind with the next letter of the alphabet, and then make that make sense. And that's the spontaneity, justification, incorporation. The spontaneity is the random word. Justification is why you said it. Incorporation is driving that story forward. So I'm going to do this again, only this time I'm going to add a timer. And I'm going to make it 75 seconds. I will probably not get to the end because, frankly, it's a pretty tough game to get through. But I'm going to see how far I can get. And a couple people entered suggestions. So I'm going to go with a realtor showing a house to a fireman. I'm going to have the fireman over here. The realtor will be showing the house to the fireman, starting with A, trying to get as far as I can, but only in 75 seconds. So here we go. Arson is a big problem in your industry, right? Will this house help? Basically, what I need is a fireproof house because so many people don't like me. I'm afraid they'll burn down my house. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as a fireman, you should be okay in a house that's burning, right? Because you can put it out. Don't underestimate the value of firemen. I feel like you're not respecting my career, and I think you're going to try to screw me out of getting a good deal on this house. Easy there, pal. I'm on your side. I love firemen. What I'm really trying to do is assess and understand your needs before I, sell you a house. Fire is a fireman's enemy. You should not be telling me that a fire is something I should like. I put out fires. I want to be safe from fires when I'm home. Good. Now that we've got that covered, I got the perfect house for you. This house has a pool in the front and a beach in the back. So you got so much water around you, you never have to worry about the fire. Hell is what I feel like I'm going to be in if I'm surrounded by fire, because my problem is that I fight fire, but I am afraid of water, which makes me a horrible fireman. I understand. How about if I put you in a house that's in the desert? Just because you're in a desert, you'll be away from water, and I guess there's no flammable material, so that's a good idea. Killing fires will be so much easier when you're in a desert house. Oh, there goes my timer. All right. So that's an example of how to do it with a timer. Now, I only made it to K, which, again, it's not my strongest game. It's not when I play. And frankly, the person who showed this to me, timer, I saw her and her partner do it in 60 seconds. The two of them together made it all the way through the alphabet. Now, what I'm going to share with you is what you can take away from that methodology. The method there, all I did was I just tried to say the first word that came in my mouth. Now, the reason that I only got to K is because I spent a little bit too much time on the justification and incorporation. Instead of us saying a word and making a very quick sentence, I said a word, made a quick sentence, and then spent another couple sentences justifying and incorporating, which is why it slowed down a little bit. But the point of that is you can see how, or hopefully you saw how, the use of the word launching off the new letter. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. You can see how launching off the new word forced me to go in completely new directions. I didn't know where that story was going to go. Arson, the weird one to start with, because normally when people play that game, they start with a very basic, like I did the first one. Are you happy with this house? Right? But I went with the first word, arson, because of fire. And then we're going into, this guy's trying to sell him a house that has fire. And then we find out that there's water, but this guy's afraid of water. So we're going to go to the desert. Keeps adding new directions. So when it comes to using interruptions to your advantage and using constraints, so often when we have something that hinders us, an interruption, or a constraint which limits us, all we try to do is get rid of it or wish it wasn't there. And ironically, the constraint can be your greatest source of creativity. If instead of wishing the constraint was not there, lamenting it, saying, oh man, things were so good before the pandemic, when I could get out of the house, totally understandable feeling, but that mindset doesn't get you anywhere. If instead of doing that, you were then to ask yourself, how can I use this to my advantage? Right? What's the opportunity here? How can I use this as the starting point for my creativity? You can use your creativity to try to solve the constraint. That's understandable. But if you can't, the next question you should ask yourself, how can I use this to my advantage? And for full-on application, ta-da, this is where this came from. I have been thinking about doing virtual, non-airplane, live on stage speaking for a while. But it was always hard. It was always such a constraint. No partners, no live audience, no suggestions, no volunteers. It was easy to just wish, I wish I didn't have to do that. This constraint forced me to think about it. So I started thinking, how can I do this without an audience, without people? And I'm doing Soloprov now. I've never done that game by myself before. Never done it virtually. It's forcing my innovation. What I'm hoping is by the end of this situation, by using the constraint as a starting point, I'll be in a stronger position than going in. The people who are just going to fall behind through this are the ones who are going to just get through the constraint. Now, I'm not judging. Everyone's at a different point of stress level and challenge. If that's what you need to do it. Get through it. But if your stress level is not that high, if you want to try to get through this better off, ask, how can I use this to my advantage to move forward, instead of just, how can I solve this or get past it? All right, so that's the second idea of using interruptions to your advantage. Use the constraint instead of fighting and resisting it. Use the change instead of fighting and resisting it. All right, I'm going to do my final exercise of this mini show. And this is one that is called Blind Line. This is one of my favorites. And in fact, every single presentation I do live, I end with this game. Now, normally this is my big finish. So when I finish the game, that's it. Boom. I say thank you and good night. Today, I'm going to play the game, but then chat a little bit afterwards about the takeaways and how I play it, so you can get some extra value out of it. And for this, what I'm going to do is I have a prop, sort of. These are cards. And it's hard to see maybe on there. But what I do is at my performances, I hand these cards out before I speak. And I have everyone in the audience write down a sentence on the back. It can be any sentence at all. A movie quote, a line of dialogue from a song, a motivational saying, whatever. And I'm going to start telling you a story. And at some point, I'm going to pull out a card and read the sentence that's written on there, and then incorporate that into my story in a way that drives the direction and hopefully makes sense. So that's all there is to it. So there was one suggestion I didn't take yet. So Pamo, thank you, welcome. He wrote down construction worker. So I'm going to tell a story. Actually, I'm not going to tell a story about a construction worker, sorry, Pamo, because it's very much like a bricklayer. I want something in a completely different direction. So I will just pick something. In fact, I'm going to pick an activity or a hobby. And again, while I set the game up, if you want to write down an activity or hobby in the comment box, I will perhaps use that. So basically, I'm going to take that hobby, I'm going to start my story, and then pull out a card, read the sentence, and then incorporate that. So let's see if I get a hobby in the chat box. If not, I'm just going to pick one. Let me think very quickly here. I like kind of off the beaten path, random ones, so I'm trying to push my creativity to come up with something I don't know much about. So I'm going to do not spelunking, macheting in the jungle. I don't know what that's called, but kind of hiking through a jungle with a machete. That's going to be the activity. I don't know. I had Indiana Jones on the brain lately, so that's where I'm going with. So that's going to be what my story is about. Oh, sand collecting, even better. Thank you very much, Pamo. I didn't really want to do macheting, but that's what I was going to do. So a chat box here is sand collecting. So I'm going to tell a story that involves sand collecting, and then I'm going to pull out a card, read what's on it, and then move forward. So here we go. And it's going to be a motivational story is how I end it. So it's going to be like the power of sand collecting. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me for my quick talk here on the power of sand collecting. Now, you might be asking yourselves, what does sand collecting have to do with me? Well, when you think about that, what I want you to do is look yourself in the mirror and instead say, speaking positive affirmations each morning gives me peace. Always smile. And what that has to do with sand collecting is that when you are collecting sand, it is so much easier to say positive affirmations, because one of the places people are the most positive and relaxed is on the beach. And most of us don't live on the beach. So if you want to be positive and make affirmations, collect sand and have a variety of sands around you. Now, I actually learned this one year when I went on vacation and I was on the beach, and I was totally burnt out on my job, and I just had to get out. And I remember I just booked a flight to a beach, and I remember sitting there on the plane just saying to myself over and over again, control the controllables and let go of the rest. And I realized all I could control was myself in that moment. I didn't like my job. I hated my boss. I hated my coworkers. All I could control was myself. So I got to this resort and I'm thinking, what can I control? Myself. So I took a walk onto the beach and I'm standing there and I saw this woman in the distance and she was so beautiful, she took my breath away. And she saw me looking at her and she wasn't really pleased. She looked up and she said to me, to die would be an awfully big adventure. I thought, oh my God, this woman is so upset that I'm looking at her. I think she's threatening to kill me. And I needed to make this better. So I didn't want her to kill me. I didn't even want her to be upset at me. I wanted to talk to her. So I walk up to her and I don't know, I was just blurting the first thing that came to my mouth. I looked her deep in the eyes and I said, documentation beats conversation the cover your ass way. She's like, what are you talking about? I said, well, listen, I know you want to kill me here, but I have a form here that I'm willing to sign saying I am not stalking you. I am not trying to do anything untoward towards you. And she had never been approached that way. She was very beautiful, so a lot of guys would talk to her, but no one had ever come to her from the contractual approach. And she was shocked. So she just took the form and said, okay, well, let's talk then. No one's ever done this for me before. So I said, listen, I've been burnt out of my life. I came here to get away. You seem very relaxed. What's your secret? And then she said something that changed my life. She looked at me and she said, life is made to wander. It's a very motivational deck, by the way. She said, life is made to wander. And then it stuck me. I could only control the controllable. But what I was trying to control was too much. And what I needed to do was wander. I needed less control. I needed to let go and just wander. And I said, will you wander with me? Will you wander down this beach with me? And she said, yes, I will wander with you. And as we were walking down the beach, that's when I had my life revelation. I felt the sand in my toes, and it was like God himself looked down at me and said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I thought to myself, what would I want others to do to me? Well, I would want this woman to kiss me. And so I should kiss her. And I was about to do it, but then when I looked at her, the voice of my father, who told me always to be respectful, stopped me in that right moment because I had signed that contract. And I remember my father, before he sent me off to college, he told me some advice. Nah, it's too motivational. He said, brush up your Shakespeare, start quoting him now. And that's when it stuck me. The Bard. I should always rely on the Bard. I didn't kiss her because that would be two towards. And that was me trying to control the situation. Instead, I turned my hands over to William Shakespeare and I looked her in the eyes and I said, to be or not to be? That is the question. And she looked at me, she said, to be. And that's when I realized she wanted to be with me forever. And right there, we committed our lives together. And it was all because the power of that relaxing in the sand, we together brought all this sand home. And now, anytime I'm feeling down and stressed, I put that sand on the floor, I step in it, and I say to myself, you've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? And I tell you, when I'm standing in sand, I do. And when you feel lucky every day, you get through life, it's very motivational, and it helps. So here's what I want you to do. Find some sand somewhere. Go on vacation, go to the beach, bring it home, step in it, look at yourself, look in the mirror, and ask yourself, will you marry me? Because if you don't love yourself enough to marry yourself, no one will. Love yourself, be happy, go forth, and if I could leave with one final thought about the power of collecting sand, it is this. Everything happens for a reason. All right. That was the game. Thank you very much. And man, it is weird doing that game without an audience responding. So that's a fun game. I love that game. It's a great way to finish performances and shows. What I want to share with you here is kind of the thought process behind playing it. Because the way that game works is every single card is an interruption. And what I want to share with you is two ways of using this to your advantage. Number one, the key that I try to do is drive the story forward. I've heard improv instructors, when teaching this game, say the line and then justify it, but then you don't really have to build off it. You can go back to what you're doing. And I don't think that's the point at all. So hopefully you could see from the context there how I did my best to make each suggestion lead and drive the story forward. So when it was about the contract, it became about me propositioning her contractually as opposed to just hitting on her, which then drove the story forward. And then I use another principle called Reincorporation, which is a very powerful improv idea, which is that as you are going, what you want to do is take what you're talking about now and reconnect it to random ideas you had before. And that's what makes the story more cohesive. So when I was saying, do unto others, and I said I wanted her to kiss me, so I should kiss her, I didn't really want the story to go there. There's a whole, propositioning and sexual assault thing there. But rather than just saying, I changed my mind, I said, oh, I remembered I signed that contract that I wouldn't do this. So that reincorporates the contract. Now, how you can use that. Number one, kind of the theories we've been talking about with Ding and the A to Z. Use this interruption to drive you forward. Number two, reincorporate. This is why people don't want to explore their creativity, because it takes them off track. And in the creative exploration phase, that's okay. The way you can make those creative ideas work is if, as you're going down the path, reconnect it back to where you were before. And the best two places to reconnect your creative ideas to, number one, mission and vision in your team or organization. I'm on the board of a couple of associations. Well, I'm on the board of one association now. I've been on board of multiple. And it's amazing how many ideas come up that are off track of the organization's mission. And all you have to do is say, hey, that's a great idea. How can we reconnect this to the mission? So that's how you combine spontaneity without being too tangential. And if you can't come up with that connection, that's a good idea that maybe, hey, that was creative. We explored. Let's let it go. But use your creativity to connect it back. So that's one way. Use the idea of reincorporation. Oh, the other place to connect it besides mission and vision is culture. As you're building your team's culture, make sure you can connect your new ideas to the culture you have, and more importantly, to the culture you want. Because sometimes it sounds like a great idea in a vacuum, but if you don't reincorporate it back, you end up doing more harm than good. So reincorporate ideas back to culture, back to mission and vision. The second way you can use this is the idea of strong offers. So every one of these cards was an offer. And improv is an offer is anything you add to the scene or story. Something you say, something you do. So every one of these cards is an offer. It's something that's put forth to the scene. And what's interesting, what I have discovered, and what I now tweak when I collect these cards, right? These are from an old show, is when I ask people to fill them out. Now I say, song lyrics and movie quotes work really well. Ironically, motivational sayings and proverbs don't work well. And that's weird, right? It's like, hey, I'm telling a motivational story, and here's why. So saying something like, these two are really good. So do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's amazing how pithy you realize motivational sayings are. Because this is not a strong offer. In the context of a scene, this does not drive the story forward at all. It requires me to use my creativity to push things forward. A strong offer is something specific that takes a bold step forward, and it moves things in a new direction. These two quotes, as you were watching, if you enjoyed that story, I'm guessing you got the biggest smile or laugh when I said, you got to ask yourself one question. Are you feeling lucky, punk? And you probably laughed the most when I said, brush up your Shakespeare. Start quoting him now. Because there's a specific strong offer in there, right? One is a Dirty Harry reference, you feel lucky, punk. The other is bringing Shakespeare in out of nowhere. Now, those are the most challenging. These generic motivational quotes and pithy sayings, I'm not criticizing anyone, right? That was what I told. In fact, on here I say you can write down a famous quote. But because they're so generic, they don't drive anything forward. So as you're using your creativity, what I want you to think about is in terms of strong offers. If you come up with a general vague idea like, oh, we could maybe try to connect with our customers more. Yeah, that's an idea, but it's not specific. It's not a strong offer, it's a generic offer. So as you go through your creative endeavors to deal with these interruptions in the world, start your brainstorming process from something specific and strong, a forward step. So instead of we should just connect with customers, say what if we called 10 customers every single day to see how they're doing in this challenge of change? Now, maybe you don't do that, but that's a starting point for your creativity. It also forces your mind to actually visualize the story, the scene, or what you're going to do. Saying, let's reach out to more customers is so vague, it doesn't put a specific idea in your mind. Saying, let's make 10 phone calls a day, now you can envision yourself. What you will also envision is the challenges you'll face, how you'll feel doing it, how you're going to move forward, which is going to spur on all that creativity. So to use the idea from Blind Line, number one, make a strong offer. Move things forward in your creative efforts and in your initiation and action. And number two, reincorporate. When you go down a random creative path, it doesn't have to derail you completely from everything you've done if you can reconnect it back to some of the things you've done before. So that is my mini show. Thank you so much for watching and participating and sharing some ideas. I really appreciate that. I am planning on doing this semi-regularly. So, if you're friends with me, or if you're not, friend me on Facebook, like my Facebook page. I'm going to post a link in the comments where you can sign up for an email list. Because in addition to these mini shows and little Facebook Lives, I'm doing Zoom meetups, which are interactive improv comedy workshops, where rather than me just performing and you watching, I'll actually put you in improv breakout rooms where you can play some of these games. It's a lot of fun, but also you get some ideas and techniques. I'm also doing the occasional Zoom webinar, which is kind of more involved than this. It's through Zoom. Usually there's slides and improv games. It's a little more cohesive than just me doing a bunch of games. So am I doing this on LinkedIn? I don't know. Someone mentioned LinkedIn video. It wasn't even a thing I thought about. So obviously I'm doing this to try to eventually get paid speaking work, and I think my clients are going to be on LinkedIn. So I'm going to look into that. So connect with me on LinkedIn as well. If you go to my website, dinghappens.com, at the bottom are my social media links. You can get a link to my Facebook and my LinkedIn. So go to dinghappens.com and you can connect with me there. So yeah, I'm really, right now, I am in the throwing a bunch of stuff against the wall phase, seeing what the audience responds to, see what people happen. Thank you, Palmo. Stay safe yourself. Thanks for joining from comedy. Thank you, Mike and Jen. Appreciate that. Appreciate you guys being on and sharing. And I hope to see you at the next one. I'm hoping I'm doing at least one a week. So hopefully I'll see you guys next week. If I don't connect with any of you before then, have a great weekend, and I will chat with you soon. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.